You know, it's so unreal to me to start talking about the prospects this early on into the season. And I guess it isn't really all too early. It kind of feels early because we stopped up 2019-20 just a few weeks ago and we just had our 2020 NHL Entry Draft. But the reality is 2020-2021 has started for a lot of these European leagues, and as a result, some of the guys who are projected to go near the top of the 2021 draft who are playing in these leagues are indeed in a position where we can talk about their performance thus far. So, today in this video, we're spending some time to go over another one of these prospects. Now, we spoke a year ago about Yaroslav Askarov and how this was the best goaltending prospect that we have seen since Andrei Vasilevsky and potentially the one with the highest upside since Carey Price. This was a guy who had higher potential than Spencer Knight, who had gone the year before. And compared to all the other goalies we have seen in the first round over the past decade and a half, there's no comparison. There hasn't been a guy who has had this much star power as we have seen with Yaroslav Askarov. But today we're going over the 2021's best goaltending prospect, the Spencer Knight of 2021, the Yaroslav Askarov of 2021, the unanimous, unregarded #1 goaltending prospect. And ironically enough, this is the best goaltending prospect we have seen since Yaroslav Askarov. So, you thought that one franchise-defining goaltender going in these NHL drafts was a lot? Well, hey, we've got another one the immediate year after. Let's talk today about Jesper Wallstedt, a guy who is playing in the SHL at a mere 17 years old. He's so far suited up for the Lulea Hockey Club, playing 4 games, and he has a .929 save percentage and a .192 goals against average. Now that in itself is beautiful. But there's some context that we have to go over that really does illustrate just how strong Jesper Wallstedt is as a prospect. But first, before we go over that, let's go over the profile. Wallstedt was born in November of 2002. He's 17 years old, 6'3", 214 pounds, a left-handed catching goaltender who is already playing some full-time SHL action. He's a guy who, back when he was 14 years old, this was 3 years ago in 2017-2018, he was playing for the J20 Super Elite VIK Vasteras team. This is a U20 hockey league, meaning that as a 14 turning 15-year-old, this guy was already playing with 19, 20-year-olds in Sweden. And it was back then, back in 2017, 2018, when people started seeing this guy on their radar. They said, okay, there's this young goalie, he's the youngest goalie to suit up and actually play in this league. And take a look at the numbers. 25 games played, a .228 goals against average, and a .921 save percentage. My goodness. Those are some very good numbers for anybody in that league, let alone somebody who is potentially 6 years younger than the older goalies and older players in that league at the time. Remember, this is a junior league. It's only meant to be played with these junior guys. And Jesper Wallstedt came in here as a 14-year-old, putting up the 4th best save percentage amongst 38 goaltenders. So this guy totally did just put himself on the map with this season, and in fact, he broke a few records as well. He was the guy who broke the record for the youngest player to ever play in the Super Elite. This was a record held by Victor Hedman a few years before, back when Hedman was 15. It's easy to say. But he actually broke another one of Victor Hedman's records too, because Hedman also had the record for the youngest player in the Super Elite to ever score a goal. Well, according to this article over here on thepuckauthority.com, on October 25th, 2017, at 14 years, 11 months, and 11 days, Jesper Wallstedt scored a goal. He scored an empty net goal, and he also assisted on the first goal of the game, too. So, even though goals definitely are not what you're looking for when you're drafting a goaltender, that certainly is a nice piece of trivia over here. The youngest player to suit up in the Super Elite ever, and the youngest player to ever score a goal in the Super Elite ever, at the ripe old age of 14 point something. As his career has gone on, though, Jesper Wallstedt spent his 15 turning 16-year-old year in that same hockey league. His numbers weren't as great as they were the previous year because he was playing on a different team, but he did spend some time with the international tournament scene as well. He put himself on the map at the U18s for Team Sweden as a 15-year-old, putting up a .936 save percentage and a .150 goals against average in 2 games played. He was 15 turning 16. He was playing with other U18 competition. He stomped. The next year after that, the most previous season, saw him wrap up his junior 20 Super Elite career with the Lulea Hockey Club, 28 games played, a .253 goals against average and a .923 save percentage as a 16 turning 17-year-old. He was so good that they promoted him to play a little bit in the SHL. He got 1 game played, a .944 save percentage and a .155 goals against average. Certainly not bad for a 17-year-old playing in his draft -2 year in the top pro league in Sweden. Now, he's here. He played a game in the Junior 20 National level, had a shutout there, so very nice for him. But we already noted his 4 games played in the SHL thus far, 192 goals against average and .929 save percentage. Let's go over onto Twitter and take a look at a few interesting stats from guys that I follow that I think you should follow as well. Take a look at what Will Scouching said about Jesper Wallstedt. I'm going to put it out there that there have been only 3 draft year SHL goalies who have ever played 10 games or more in their draft years, ever. Draft year, what does that mean? That's the year wherein they're going to get drafted. So Jesper Wallstedt is going to get drafted in 2021's NHL Entry Draft, meaning that his draft year is 2020-2021. The last goaltender to play at least 10 games in their draft year in the SHL played in 1999. And none of these guys, the previous 3 guys to do it, we're over a .900 save percentage. Jesper Wallstedt right now is at a .929. He's at 4 games, taken over the reins as the #1 starter as the Lulea Hockey Club have played 7 games in total. Wallstedt started 4 of them. He's on pace to playing a very big portion of this year and breaking this mold if he continues the save percentage. And yeah, that's a pretty good number. Let's go over onto our reply over here because this is from our buddy Byron. He replies with this. Taking a look at some U19 seasons in the SHL. These are some guys who are playing a year ahead, but who indeed are still some pretty young guys. We saw Hugo Alnefelt last year play 18 games in a .905. Philip Gustafsson in 2016-17 had 15 games played in a .912. Felix Sandstrom had 25 games in 2015-16 in a .905. And Jacob Markstrom had 35 games, a .917 in 2008-2009. And this was Jacob Markstrom's draft plus 1 year. So it's a year removed from the status of the year that Wallstedt is playing in right now. And he's better than all of these guys. Again, this is taking a look at U19 seasons, so the tracking actually includes another year. What you have here in Jesper Wallstedt is quite literally the best statistical goaltender we have seen in Swedish hockey history in terms of being this good, this young. There has been nobody else in Swedish hockey history who has had this level of success before the age of 18. And Jesper Wallstedt brings all of the winning capabilities that he has had over the past few years of his teenage hockey life. He brings stability. He wins at every level he is at. He knows how to adapt and he knows how to play well. This is the same guarantee you're given with Yaroslav Askarov, and it's why people said, even though Askarov is a guy who wasn't playing in the KHL, he was a guy who still exhibited the most success any young Russian goaltender ever had up until that point, meaning that he was on pace to becoming better than the Vasilevskis and the Sorokins and the Sheshurkins. Wallstedt is in a similar boat here, but he's in the Swedish boat rather than the Russian boat. If you're going to take a swing on a goaltender up high in a draft, this is the guy to do it, especially with the fact that the 2021 NHL Entry Draft is seen as, in general, a weaker draft than 2020's was. 2020 saw a boatload of very good #1 caliber forwards getting taken in the top 10, the top 11, or 12 of the draft. Yaroslav Askarov was fighting for that spot, and thus he went a little bit later than a lot of people projected he could have gone. Jesper Wallstedt is going in a draft that many people see as not as top-heavy as 2020's, so in my opinion, I would not be surprised, going forward into the next year, to see Jesper Wallstedt, if he continues the pace that he is at right now, to get drafted somewhere in the top 7 in the NHL Entry Draft. Not just because he is capable of being that caliber prospect from a team value point of view, but because you're not sacrificing an Alexander Holtz, for example, to get this kind of guy. You're not sacrificing a Marco Rossi or a Cole Perfetti to get this kind of guy. You're sacrificing some really good D-men, but at the end of the day, the 2021 draft is so spread out, at least at this point in time, that there is so much room for flexibility, which kind of illustrates a little bit further how Spencer Knight was going in a draft class that was a little bit weaker up top, which is why he went a little bit higher than he would have if he was drafted in, let's say, 2020, where a guy like Yaroslav Askarov slipped to Nashville. But because 2021 is a little bit of a weaker draft, I would not be surprised to see Wallstedt break that top 10, maybe even the top 7, who knows. But talk to me in the comments what you think about this goaltending prospect, a guy who has been so good at every level he has played at, playing as a 14-year-old against 20-year-olds and doing extraordinarily well, but now being a #1 goalie in the Pro League in Sweden as a 17-year-old today. Talk to me in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed this video, and bye.